So welcome everybody to my channel, and people who come back, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk a lot about a really special subject that I've been fascinated by for a really long time, and calls under the name of Esoteric Physics, Esoteric Science. And first off, before I get a lot of people asking me where my degree is, I have something to offer here, some information. Basically, I'm an aggregator of information. I'm a collector. I'm a curious person all my life, and I have investigated a lot of different subjects. And without belaboring that point here, I offer just listen to what I say, and I think that you'll find that no matter what area of life you're in, whether it's psychology or science or so on, or you'll find some of my videos very helpful in understanding of this light. Because once again, I repeat that I've said many times that our perception is so important in how we see things that at the very least, okay, we just need to broaden it. Okay, that's what all the greatest teachers and wise people have come on this planet, and all our friends and neighbors, you say, if you just really open, be like a child. The child is maybe the wrong word, but just be curious, be open, be interested in your own existence in a really passionate way, because here we are. Go look at yourself in the mirror. I offer this, and look and say, who is that being there, sitting there? Just a total amazing creation, walking, talking, breathes, it heals itself, it has all these features that we explore as we get older. It's amazing. So I want to talk today about esoteric physics, and I just say, like I said, I've studied a lot of different subjects and a variety. I have both right brain and left brain. I have the mystical side of me and meditation all my life since I was young, and also curious about electronics and about physics and all those kind of things, chemistry. But one thing I have done is I've studied a lot of the esoteric teachings, because when I was young, I first of all had a powerful inner experience. Meditation, we all know, we've done some private meditation. We have the inner experience in all my life, every day of my life. I'm 69 years old. Since I was in my early 20s, I have just gone inward to some extent, in addition to the other things that I've explored in my life and enjoyed. So what I offer here is a combination of experience that I think you'll find relevant in a lot of my content. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the real basic physics that, you know, the ancient people. If you look at the really esoteric teachings, basically all the great sages that we honor, they said, know who you are. Who is that being that's in the mirror? What is it? I mean, it's just a magical thing if you think about it, because we have to have oxygen and hydrogen just to be alive, and hydrogen is the first element. So the whole universe has to be here for us to breathe and so on. So the ancient people who taught us and left us a lot of really important information went inward in exploration of what is the energy, because you can feel energy. You can explore energy by watching the ripples in a stream and wind, and you can feel things, and you can feel the energy of an animal and the prana. And there are people who lived outdoors. They were very, very sensitive with their bodies and their senses. So again, the ancient teachers and current teachers, basically the old idea is, if you understand who you are as a being and what your perceptual faculties can be, that's a start. Because you have to start right there and say, well, what is my personal capacity? This is my instrument that I have, my awareness. And so there are techniques that you can get involved in and practice. There's many of them who help us understand, just infinitely broaden our awareness. Now, to make matters short here, essentially, this being that we have, this life, this whatever you are, it's a little like a quantum computer. It's a combination of a lot of energies, and activated by an awareness and will, And there's a lot of ancient teachings that you have to start with the actual fundamentals. Okay, for example, let's say, and there's mathematical truth to this, you start conceptually with just one unity. The universe that we're in, if you look about the set theory, the so-called set theory, the infinite set of infinite sets, whatever, the universe, I mean, we can't really talk about that stuff because we don't even know how long it's been around, and what are we? We're just like a nothing. So our existence, the sages say that our conscious ability to be in this life here has a link, because it's linked through the atoms in our being. The energy in us moves, and the atom moves us. Where this being, let's say, for example, there's an old analogy. Let's say you're on a horse, and the horse is riding around, and let's say the horse represents the physical body that you have, and there's a lot of movements, and you know how if you've ever ridden a horse and you never know what it's going to do next, it just sort of moves around, and unless you try to control it. So then that brings in the rider on the horse. We are the rider on this horse of our being, and our being consists of this body, and the body consists of water and electricity and a whole bunch of other things, and warmth and sound and so on. And we are the rider on that horse. There's something called our self, our conscious beingness, our will. And the sages say, there's an ancient statement, as above, so below. The microcosm, the macrocosm. Our physical chemistry of our brain is integrated to the universe, to the cosmos, to the electricity, to the oxygen, to the... Our independent manufactured identity we have, the name that we're given, the personality that we perform with, and so on, all of that is a manufactured thing. At the root of that is something called the I am, the the Aum, the soul, the name that can't be spoken, the breath of life, the name of God, the Holy Spirit. All those things have to do with the breathing of the universe. The cosmos is breathing us. And on top of that, there is an activated will that essentially, that thread of will and understanding and a thread of consciousness goes all the way back right to the very subatomic particles into where I call the quantum computer of existence. Now, that's an ancient statement, and it's made out in ancient teachings in a very, very symbolic way, because there are simplified ways and metaphors that we can use to convey some of these essential, ultimately super basic truths. Now, to give you an example here, everybody's familiar with this particular shape. It's basically just what they call a tetrahedron. There's four sides, and 3 times 4 is 12. And this particular shape is one of the strongest in the cosmos, they say. The scientists say this is not, and yet ancient teachings talk about this kind of thing, because you have basically, if you conceive of the essence, the ancient teachings say space is an entity. Whatever consciousness is, if you see it in billions of different kinds of beings, there's all kinds of beings that have no consciousness, and whereas it must come, the consciousness must come from the ultimate root of everything. It's embedded in everything, and that's why from the soil of the consciousness of the universe, everything starts coming out, and then eventually it goes back. There's no other place for it to go. Just like the ocean, if you have it can be a fish or a whale or a little cell in the ocean, you rise and you live there in the ocean for a while, and then you dissolve back into it. There's no other thing. So they start with the concept of oneness, and from that oneness, for example, if you stay, oneness eventually divides, and then you have people, psychologists and esotericists and even physicists will understand, you have one, and then you have it split, and then it becomes a polarity. Okay, the one needs the other. Okay, you must have, there's a positive and a negative, and then from that point of view, once the duality starts to happen, once the ripple starts to happen, the spoken word, the sound, the primordial sound, the the cosmic bang, the whatever you talk about, there's an essence that comes, the 1 becomes 2, and naturally, because as soon as there's a polarity, there's activity going on, and then there's a third. So there's a 1, 2, then there has to be a 3. And then the triangle is one of the simplest, basic, ultimate structures on a physical plane. And then, again, the tetrahedron is basically 3 of those, 4 of those triangles. So 4 times 3 is 12. And that is basically just a real introduction to some ultimate basics here. Now, again, we reflect on who we are. What is our tool? If we want to understand anything, anything in life we want to understand, we have to first look at, okay, what kind of tools do we have, okay? The scientists say, well, I want to look at the tiny pieces of a cell. I need, what kind of a microscope do I need? How much does it need to magnify? If you want to cut like something, a very, very fine material, you need maybe you need a laser to cut glass or diamond, you see. What is the instrument that we have to even understand anything? Because if you look at our just physical senses, they're extremely narrow on the band of what exists. We know that. So, therefore, we have to use analogy, because as above, so below. There's frequency bands, and then there's multiples of those bands, and then there's different mathematical ratios. So you basically have ratios, you have duality, and you have activity. So they're at the root of this universe, basically, essentially, again, everything has its roots. The consciousness has its roots in the very atomic nature of the cosmos. And therefore, every vibration, for example, that we see, when we look at a star or something, and we're trying to figure out, well, what the hell is that frequency? When we identify it, we narrow it, we get the pulse, or we identify that particular spectrum that it's in or something. But it's broadcasting information. Just like we look at a movie theater and you look back at the screen and you see a screen, and then you look back where it's coming from, and you see this beam of light coming. It's just a beam of light. You can't really see what it is until it gets to a screen. So information is pervading this cosmos that is on such a profound nature that if we just get a tiny glimpse of it, that's why we have to get back to the simple. We have to get back to the very essence of everything and look at some of the basic principles. You have the singularity, you have the duality, then you have the triplicity. And then what happens next? If you go from a 3 to a 4, you get into a cube situation, 4 times 6. So you have a whole bunch of interesting mathematical principles that are involved in the essence of creation. So, as above, so below, as within, so without. That we are a macrocosm. That's why the scriptures and so on say that, look, you have essence of sight, you have essence of hearing, you have essence of feeling, you have essence, and those essences are all linked to the cosmic essence of. That's the way that the divine expressed itself through first various kinds of principles. And when people say God, see, there have been sages who have been asked, well, what is there God or no God? And I think it was Buddha said, well, whatever way he said, someone would be mad at him. Because ultimately, when we understand the oneness of our own existence, the question of God doesn't come up, you see. Because our own existence and our own awareness is linked all the way back to that God itself, that there won't be a question of, do we exist? How can we exist? Are we just a bunch of hydrogen and water and just electricity and sound and heat, and that's all we are? No. So the essence of science in the esoteric sense in physics starts with awareness of our own tool, our own awareness, and then we can begin to understand and look into some of these subjects, because ultimately the root consciousness is the final arbiter. We're not going to get the information that we need ultimately from an outside source, generally. We can get hints. And that's why a lot of the esoteric teachings are all symbolic or metaphorical, because how can you put into words such a complex thing? So you reduce it to simplicity. Say, look, the 1 becomes a 2, the 2 becomes a 3. You make a number system, then you get the 10, you get the Merkaba, and you get all the different physical solids and so on. And that's how it develops. So when you take that kind of thinking that space is an entity, there's a unity of things. Okay, if you think about there's one proton, or one positive thing, then that one is pervasive. There's one positive force, you might say, and it's not in our understanding of positive, but there's one particular type of polarity, you might say, and then there's another, the opposite type of polarity, without getting any kind of negative thing about it. And then from those two, activity happens, because if there wasn't a polarity, the activity wouldn't happen. So then you get the third. Now, the cosmic physics that I understand and read about, and some books I've mentioned on previous videos, have been about understanding these basic principles, and that our own awareness plays a role in gathering and understanding the cosmos as without, so within. So using the metaphors of the great sages and the geometry that we've been taught and the ratios that are obvious to scientists and so on, and we explore our own being, our own awareness has dimensions that we can't put into words, you see. So we have a time dimension of our understanding, and when we, as physicists, we might explore, okay, there's time, and we conceptualize time, and we measure time, and so on. But there's another kind of time that goes on in the cosmos, that the time that we make is often just very rigid. Okay, we get it down to the cesium atom, how much it vibrates, exactly precise. Okay, well, that's the second that we're going to talk about here, that one precise moment. That's how they measure time. But there's another type of time that the cosmos works on, and that's cyclic time and spiralic time. And that kind of time has cycles. It's then based on ratios, so that you have such a situation that you have, like, once you get into this kind of a shape, and then you start rotating that, then you start getting spirals. You see, you get spin. Spin is a factor in this cosmos. And again, everything that we observe, there's a reflection in our own being. For example, momentum. In our own being, there's stillness. There's a stillness of our own being that is absolutely just stops. Everything stops. And that's a beautiful thing. And yet, that same, it's almost like we have this vehicle and we can completely bring it to a total stop. Or maybe we can go into another band and have another type of, almost like you're flying on light, just like people do in dreams. Next thing you know, I mean, how does that happen? What if you could do it deliberately? You see, there are people, they're finding their dreams and they're doing all kinds of fun things and going to other planets and going into the water and whatever, back to Atlantis, see their dog or whatever. But our awareness has dimensions that are just like, it's like features in your car that you didn't know about. You know, I mean, if you bought a new car these days, the manual's a big fat thing. It's like, well, who's going to read that thing? And basically, a lot of them are intuitive. Like, okay, well, there's a bunch of buttons, and they have little icons on them, and little, okay, I figured that out. It's the AC over there, or whatever. But our own being has those kind of dimensions. That's our instrument. So that's where we start exploring. Now, again, the essence of esoteric physics, the religions of old, the Egyptian, the Hindus, and so on, they integrated their awareness with nature, with the cosmos. That's the ultimate. You can't separate our existence. You can't separate our awareness from what we're observing. Because our very awareness, our ability to say I, stems from the root of what we're looking at. It's like, I give this example, how can you catch your elbow with your hand? Is to observe our own awareness requires a neutral state of letting go of everything for a while. Buddha said like 15 seconds. You let go for 15 seconds, you find yourself in another dimension. Now, I want to talk a little more about some of those. I've made other videos about some of this stuff, and I've had charts and things. And I want to talk a little more casually because I have this thing. It's comfortable and it feels like non-threatening. I blend into the woods, and I'm a nobody, basically. I'm someone out here with 2 cents, and I think if you find my subject matter useful in many different parts of people's professions, because it has to do with the essence of who we are and how we perceive, and the fact that there's a lot more going on in our existence. That just like in an airplane, you get trained that you have to have a situational awareness a lot bigger and different than when you're in a car. You have to be aware of winds, and there's an analogy. There's things in aviation that you can't control, like winds and so on, and weather, and then there's things that you can control. So you have to use the tools that you have, their awareness, to manage the tools that you can control to deal with the things that you can't control. And there's a lot of metaphors in that. Now, exploring science, I'm going to have basically more casual discussion about this, and I love the feedback. Please like and share. I'm having a dialogue hopefully with people, because there's so much that we can learn in this life that enhances our own joy and appreciation of it. So thanks again for listening. I'll make some more videos and follow up with some of these interesting things I've discovered. So